first generation students, please here apply. You're welcome. And schools have also gotten better at marketing themselves virtually. So kids, will apply to colleges without ever stepping foot on campus. So these changes have produced more applications than ever before. And the Common App, and that's the way students apply to colleges, they're seeing that their total volume of applications submitted is up 65% in just 4 years. That's huge. It tells us that kids are applying to colleges at record numbers, and that has resulted in lower acceptance rates. So college admissions has become a numbers game. There's so many kids applying that you have to figure out how you can stand out that's different from everybody else. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. But let's take a look at some of the freshman profiles in our area. Take a look at University of Maryland. This is a competitive school, meaning even though 45% of students were admitted, they still got almost 60,000 applications. And it's still a school that's pretty hard to get into because lots of kids want to apply. James Madison University, which is in Virginia, they're also seeing record number of applicants, 37,000. And when you look at these big state schools, their acceptance data really depends on where you live. So if you live in Maryland and you apply to Maryland, there are more openings because it's an in-state school, but also more students are applying to that school. Same with James Madison and University of Virginia. Depending where you live, you're going to apply as an in-state or out-of-state student. But regardless, it's still tough to get into a flagship university that's super competitive like University of Virginia. Even Penn State, which was a school that a lot of kids applied to, kind of a middle of the road school. Even that school is seeing a record number of applications and 55% acceptance rate. So often when students think about college, especially when they're younger and parents think about colleges, we think of these brand name schools like Maryland or Virginia, Virginia Tech, JMU, George Washington, American. And sometimes parents don't stop to think, well, what else is out there? Are there other schools that could be a match? And that's when you really want to think outside the box. And what I mean by that is considering other schools that aren't just, these brand name schools that everybody hears about. For example, we often think, well, if you want a college with a great business school, you have to go to University of Pennsylvania. But actually, the Eli School at Michigan State is incredibly well known in the area of business. For entrepreneurship, a little known school outside of Boston is called Babson. Parents don't often think about. And then if you love the arts, the University of Cincinnati or Ithaca College in New York could be great options aside from Juilliard as an example. And when it comes to job placement, a school like James Madison University in Virginia has one of the highest placement rates for all of the Virginia schools. So thinking of schools that may not be on your radar at first is a good idea. So we want to research colleges and make sure that our students have a balanced list. This is something students do usually. They start with their college list when they're probably sophomores in high school. Sometimes kids will start earlier, sometimes a little bit later. But the thing that you want to do, and the thing that we do when we work with kids, is we want to help them craft a preliminary list of colleges that is balanced. Often when parents call our office looking for help with the application process, their lists are really out of whack. They have a lot of reach schools that are very hard to get into. And when this happens and kids are applying to schools that are really hard to get into, They're often very disappointed and they don't have lots of options if they don't get into those schools at the end of the day. So the list needs to be balanced. It needs to be composed of most likely, which we used to call them safety schools. These are schools that, based on their mid 50th percentile criteria, the student has the grades and the test scores and everything else and is most likely to get in. Target schools mean that the student falls within the mid-range of the 50th percentile profile, or maybe at the slightly to higher end. And then reach means that this college's, their GPA and their test scores might be a little bit above what the student has. So we want to have a balance in all these three categories and not just a bunch of reach schools. That's not a great idea. And of course, there are other factors like, what major are you interested in? Or maybe you're undecided and you want to apply to a liberal arts school. What is the cost? What location do you like? Are you applying in-state and out-of-state because it's different? It's generally harder to get into an out-of-state college. What is the size of the school? Do they have the sports programs that you want? So there's all kinds of things that are in consideration. And so is the number of schools that kids apply to. And I would say that most students that we work with will apply to between 7 and 12 schools, which is kind of a lot. So there's a lot of work that goes into the application process. And for that reason, we put together checklists that I think are so incredibly helpful to parents and kids. So these checklists tell you, okay, in 9th grade, this is what I need to be doing. This is my checklist for my 10th grader, for an 11th grader, and for a 12th grader. And you can get these on our website, which is ectutoring.com/college-consulting. And you can download those right to your desktop or your phone. And those are great. The checklists are really a great resource. So, what are colleges looking for? What does it take to stand out if you're looking to go to the college of your dreams? First of all, the number one factor for getting into college these days are your grades. Do you have good grades in rigorous classes, which is the other factor? And rigor means, did you just take general classes, or have you challenged yourself by taking maybe AP or IB classes, or maybe honors classes? So it can't just be, if you want to apply to a competitive school, that you have good grades. A lot of kids have good grades, but have you also taken rigorous classes? And for that reason, picking classes is incredibly important. I saw the parent of an 8th grader on the call today, and that is a perfect time, because you kind of want to do something we call course mapping. You want to figure out, all right, what courses will my child take in 8th grade and 9th grade, so that you have a progression. So grades, grades and rigor, as I mentioned, test scores are coming back. So for the last few years, test scores haven't been so important, but now a lot of schools are saying, actually, we've done studies, and the number one predictor of how students do their freshman year is actually test scores, not their high school GPA. And for that reason, competitive schools, they want to see a test score. So kids are now studying again for the SAT and the ACT. We'll talk about that in a minute. Essays are also important. Letters of recommendation, and the activities a student does. These are the things, sometimes kids will say it's their resume, but these are the things that they've done in high school starting in 9th grade. So as parents, it's a good idea to keep a list of the things that your child has done, especially having a job. Having a job is something that colleges look at very favorably. It shows that you're dependable and you're responsible, that you can juggle part-time work and also go to school. And so for that reason, many schools now, I was just on a panel with 4 universities, and they all said the same thing. And I was talking to one of our college consultants today who worked at UNC Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And she said the same thing, like this, seeing kids with a job, we look very, very favorably on this, more so than even letters of recommendation. And so this activities portion of your application is really important. And so is your narrative. And your narrative is really what's unique about you. So let's talk about that for a second. What does this mean? Kids fall into one of 2 camps. Either they know what they want to do. For example, they want to be an engineer. And the things they do over the summer, maybe they went to an engineering camp. Maybe they had a job shadow at an engineering firm. Maybe they took an engineering class at the local community college or online. Those paint the picture that this student loves engineering. But then we also have kids that are unsure of what they want to do. How are they going to craft their narrative? It doesn't have to be what they're going to major in. It could be something else completely. It might be that we had a student who wasn't sure what he wanted to be, what he wanted to do, but he had this business selling. He was a really good fly fisherman, and he made this lure that he used, and he sold it on Etsy. And he wrote his narrative about how he loved fly fishing and created a little business out of it. We've had kids write essays on all different things and really paint their picture of the type of person they are through their essay. I was reading an article from in my alumni magazine of Boston College, and the admissions director said that one of the best essays he ever wrote was from a student who started her essay with the sentence, "Everybody laughed." And then she went on to describe how she was raised in a very independent household, and she was a very, very independent person. And her parents never helped her with her homework. So one year, she was in 4th grade, she had a science project that she had to turn in, and all the other kids' parents helped them, and their science projects were beautiful and perfect, and hers looked like a 4th grader made it, and people laughed at it. But she was proud of it. And she went on to talk about how she's always been independent. She's had a job. She's worked for her money, and how that moment in time really shed light on the rest of her high school career. So your narrative can be something unique about you, or it can be what you want to do when you're older. And typically kids will develop things around their narrative. What they do over the summer or their course selection can involve their narrative. As I mentioned, sometimes we get students that have no idea what they want to do, and they haven't really found anything that they feel passionate about, and that's okay. We can't expect a 16 or 17-year-old to know what they want to do when they grow up. That's perfectly normal. And in fact, it's also normal to start something in college and then change your major. About 50% of students will, in fact, end up changing their major. But when we work with kids, one of the things that we do when we get students that say, "I don't know what I want to do," we have them take an assessment. And it's called AchieveWorks. And I personally really, really like getting the data from this because it assesses kids' personality, their skills, and their learning and productivity. And it tells us, hey, this is what you're really great at. And these are some majors and careers that could be really great for you based on your strengths. So when kids come to us kind of feeling like I'm average, there's nothing really special about me, it's not true. And we can always find something unique about that student. And sometimes it will start with an assessment. All right, so let's go back to something I mentioned in the beginning, and this is course selection. At this time of year, if you have an 8th grader, a 9th grader, a 10th grader, or an 11th grader, they probably already picked their classes. It is not too late to change a course selection if you want to. There's a strategy around course selection. And basically, you want to be taking the most competitive classes and the most challenging classes you can around your interest. So if you want to be an engineer, you need to be taking challenging math and science courses. If you might want to major in political science, you should be taking challenging classes in the humanities. And so picking the right classes is extremely strategic. If you think you might want to be a business major, maybe taking an elective like marketing could be helpful. There's still time to change. And we work with kids right now that they picked their classes, then they came to us for help. And that's one of the first things we do is we look at their course selection, and sometimes we will have them change a few things. Other things you can do right now, now this wouldn't be for like a 4th grader, but certainly for a middle school student and a high school student, you can make it a summer of intention. It's the time to just explore interests that, whatever your child is interested in. Maybe they're interested in animals. Could they do a job shadow? Not an internship. That's really, really hard to get. But a job shadow means maybe you go to a vet's office and you follow around a vet technician for 2 hours. That's something awesome for kids to do over the summer. They can take an online class. Some of these online classes are just a couple hours long. There's all types of things that kids can do over the summer to kind of feel out what they might be interested in or to do what they love. They can also volunteer or maybe have a side hustle. I remember when my son was applying to college, he had a little side hustle in that he would take videos of different hip hop bands in the area, and he was really good at it, and he really, really enjoyed it. And he would edit the videos, and then the bands, the musical groups would use them in their marketing. And he started to do more and more of this work. So I said, what if you made a little business out of this? So we went up to the Fairfax County courthouse, and he got a Fairfax County business license, and it was $25. And he was really, really proud of it. And in his essay, when he talked about wanting to major in video production, he talked about how he had his own little business named Dolan Productions. So there's all kinds of things kids can do over the summer. But the summer should be exploring interests. Even if kids just do 1 or 2 things instead of just, playing video games, there should be some exploration of their interests. Other things students can do is show demonstrated interest to colleges. So if they're in high school and they want to go to, let's say Towson, they might go to a Towson game, or maybe they fill out the interest form on the Towson website. Some schools like to see that you're interested in them. Some schools don't really care. For example, University of Maryland does not track demonstrated interest, but over on the other side of the river, Christopher Newport and William and Mary really, really track demonstrated interest, and they have interviews. And so that shows if you sign up and go to an interview that you really want to go there. And colleges are about yield. They also want to take students, they want to accept students that they think are going to accept. And so for some schools, demonstrated interest is important. Other things you can do now for high schoolers is to have a testing plan. And we talked about test optional, but that's not what it really means anymore. Students need to be studying for and taking a test. Testing gives colleges another data point, which they so want and need. A lot of schools now require it. And by the time many of you on this call with younger kids, your kids get to their junior year and they're applying to colleges, I can bet that colleges are going to require it. It's not going to be optional because the requirements are changing. So right now, when kids do not submit a test, it puts greater scrutiny on other things like their grades, their course selection, their essays, their extracurriculars. The SAT just released a digital version, and I'll just share some of what these things are. They're shorter reading passages. They're a little bit more difficulty in the text. There are fewer math concepts, but they go in depth, and everything is done digitally now with the SAT. Kids go to the test site at school like they did before, but everything's on a laptop. The ACT is not digital. It's a different test. It's a longer test where kids have longer reading passages. They don't have to know as much vocabulary though. And it's at a faster pace. So in order to finish, you kind of have to go at a faster pace on the ACT. I will say that kids are starting to favor right now the digital SAT because they like it. It's shorter, 2 hours and 24 minutes. It has 98 questions and it's adaptive, meaning that they take a module, and depending on how they do on that module, whether they do a good job or not so good, that will dictate the next round of questions. So if they're only getting the easy questions right and not the medium and hard, in the next section, they're not going to give them any hard questions. They're going to give them easy and medium. So that's what is adaptive about the SAT. The ACT is not adaptive because it's not online. It's a longer test. There are a lot more questions. The test is the same for all the kids. But the big difference is that the ACT has 4 sections. It has math, writing, reading, and science. Whereas the SAT, the digital SAT, has 2 sections. Half of it is math, and then half of it is writing and reading, grammar mostly. So for a lot of kids that love math, they sometimes will favor the SAT because it's half of their score. These are the upcoming dates. We got some coming up in April, June, and July. And then for the SAT in May, June, and August. And typically students will take the test twice. Usually, sometimes in the fall of their junior year, but typically in the spring of their junior year also. And I'll just show you this checklist again, in case you didn't get it before. This is so valuable, so I would absolutely download it if you didn't get this before. It tells you what to do at each grade level. All right, so speaking of that, let's talk about what kids should do in the most important years. So let's start in 11th grade, the junior year. What should you do the junior year? You should be focusing on grades because, as we talked about, your grades are really, really important. You should have a solid testing plan. You should know if you're going to take the SAT or the ACT. You do not need to take both. You can save time and effort if you decide on the one test you're going to take and you practice and prepare just for that test. You want to plan out your summer to make sure that you're doing things that can help you over the summer. And then as a junior, you should be creating and refining your college list to making sure it's balanced with most likely target and reach schools. And then lastly, hopefully you can get to some school visits and potentially some interviews too, if the colleges allow it. Now, when kids are younger, and I know we have parents of younger students, let's talk about what they should do when they're younger. So that starts out with course mapping, knowing, okay, if I like math and I'm good at math, what math class should I take in 8th grade? Because the class you take in 8th grade dictates what you will then take in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. So there's really strategy that goes along to it. We spend a lot of time with our students on course mapping. You want to focus on your grades, as we talked about. And of course, you want to think about your extracurriculars, what you're doing after school, and what you might do in the summer. And I will tell you that when you have a younger student, you're gold. If you can start early and start your runway and plan ahead, it saves so much stress at the end of the day. A lot of kids come to us in the spring of their junior year or the summer before their senior year, and they're overwhelmed and stressed because they've waited till the last minute to get everything done. And that creates, a lot of anxiety for everybody. So I'm glad parents of younger kids are here. It will help you to get started early and plan ahead. At the end of the day, there is a college for everybody. There are actually over 4,000 colleges in the country. And those include community colleges too. But there are over 2,000 four-year universities. So there are so many options for kids, whether kids are high performers and high flyers, or they've merely tolerated high school, but they have a vision for what they want to do when they get older and they know college is in their future. There is a college for everyone. So on that note, I would love to go to the chat in just a second. And before we wrap up, I wanted to share that we work with kids starting in 8th grade. We have a program for students in 8th, 9th, and 10th, our program for juniors, and our Senior Express program, which right now would be a little late for seniors because they've already applied. But we work with kids of all ages, and you can learn more about our program at ectutoring.com/college-counseling. Or if you want to talk about it, scan this QR code and you can set up an appointment for 20 minutes to talk about your child's situation. And we're happy to help. So thank you, Shayna and everybody from Parent to Go Academy.